We are living through one of the most chilling moments in modern celebrity history. Right now, in March 2026, Rihanna and ASAP Rocky are grappling with the aftermath of what could have been a catastrophic, irreversible tragedy. One that nearly wiped out an entire family in the blink of an eye. And the family of the woman responsible has finally decided to speak. What they are saying has sent shockwaves through social media, through the entertainment industry, and through every corner of the internet where people follow celebrity news. It is not what anyone expected. It is not a simple apology. It is not a clean explanation. It is a tangled, contradictory, deeply unsettling set of statements that raises far more questions than it answers. Because when you look at the physical evidence, the bullet holes ripped through metal, the trajectory of those rounds, the exact location where Rihanna and Rocky were sitting with their children just rooms away, you begin to understand the terrifying reality of what almost happened. We came within inches, within seconds, of losing one of the most iconic figures in modern music. We came within a whisper of 3 young children growing up without their parents. This is not simply another tabloid headline about a celebrity mishap. This is a harrowing case study in what happens when parasocial relationships metastasize into something monstrous. It is a story about the catastrophic failures of the mental health system. It is a cautionary tale about the dark underbelly of stan culture, a culture that celebrates obsession, rewards loyalty to the point of fanaticism, and creates an environment where the line between devotion and delusion becomes invisible. And before we go any further, understand that telling this story fully and honestly is going to make a lot of people deeply uncomfortable. The Rihanna Navy will flood the comments defending their idol. The family supporters will push back against any scrutiny. People on every side of this debate will insist that their perspective is the only correct one. But someone has to lay out the entire picture, every detail, every contradiction, every red flag that the mainstream coverage is glossing over. When you see the full scope of what has been uncovered, you will understand why this incident reverberates far beyond a single delusional fan and a single celebrity estate. Let us get into it. For those who are encountering this story for the first time, here is what happened. This past Sunday, at approximately 1:19 in the afternoon, an armed woman opened fire on Rihanna's Los Angeles estate. She discharged 14 rounds from an AR-15 style rifle. 14 rounds. That is not a warning shot. That is not a cry for help. That is a sustained, deliberate assault with a weapon designed for maximum damage. Rihanna and ASAP Rocky were home at the time. They were on the property with their 3 young children, their boys RZA and Riot Rose, and their youngest. But the family was not clustered in the main house. Rihanna and Rocky had retreated to a private space, an Airstream trailer parked on the estate grounds, a space that insiders have referred to as the mommy-daddy room. It was their personal sanctuary, a place where they could steal a few moments of intimacy and peace while nannies attended to the children inside the main residence. And the shooter knew exactly where they were. 3 of the 14 rounds were fired directly through the front of that Airstream trailer. 3 precision shots, clustered at roughly the same height, punching through the thin metal shell of the vehicle with terrifying accuracy. When photos of the Airstream were leaked on Monday morning, the public saw what could have been the scene of a double homicide. The bullet holes were at head level. If Rihanna had been standing near the front of the trailer, if Rocky had shifted his position by a few feet, if one of the children had wandered out to find their parents, we would not be discussing a near miss. We would be mourning a loss that would have shattered an entire generation. The shooter has been identified as a woman named Ivana. She was apprehended at the scene by LAPD officers who responded within minutes. She has been charged with 14 counts of assault with a deadly weapon and 1 count of attempted murder. She is currently in custody, and the legal machinery is grinding forward. But in the 48 hours following the shooting, a different drama began to unfold. One playing out not in courtrooms but on social media. Ivana's family members, led primarily by a cousin, began posting a series of lengthy statements on Instagram. These statements were emotional, detailed, and at times contradictory. They painted a picture of a woman who had once been vibrant and loving, but who had been progressively consumed by mental illness following a severe car accident. They apologized profusely to Rihanna and her family. They insisted they had done everything in their power to help Ivana. They pleaded with the public to understand that this was not the act of an evil person, but of a deeply broken one. And some of what they said is genuinely sympathetic. Some of it aligns with the very real, very documented failures of the American mental health system. But other parts of their statements are riddled with inconsistencies, omissions, and contradictions that demand scrutiny. Because if the family truly understood the depth of Ivana's deterioration, why did no one intervene more aggressively? If they recognized the signs of dangerous delusion, why was Ivana still in possession of her child? And if they knew she was fixated on a celebrity to the point of constructing an alternate reality, why did no one raise an alarm before 14 bullets were fired into a home where children slept? These are not rhetorical questions. These are the questions that investigators, legal experts, and millions of people around the world are asking right now. And the family statements, while heartfelt, are not providing satisfying answers. Let us break down what we know, what the family is claiming, and where the fractures in their narrative become impossible to ignore. When investigators and internet sleuths began tracing Ivana's digital presence, a disturbing pattern emerged. This was not a sudden eruption of violence. This was a slow, methodical escalation that played out in plain sight for anyone who cared to look. In the days immediately preceding the shooting, Ivana deactivated her Instagram account and scrubbed it of content. This is a significant detail. People who act on sudden impulse do not take the time to sanitize their digital footprint. The act of deleting social media suggests awareness, premeditation, and the understanding that what she was about to do would draw scrutiny to her online presence. She was not lost in a fog of confusion. She was organized enough to cover her tracks. However, her YouTube channel remained active, and what is on that channel is among the most chilling content you will ever encounter. Ivana posted videos centered on ministry, on divine communication, on spiritual warfare. She spoke with absolute conviction about receiving direct messages from God. She described herself as a soldier in a righteous battle. She framed her worldview in the language of prophecy and holy purpose. And woven through this religious framework was an unmistakable fixation, a belief that certain public figures, potentially including Rihanna, were agents of spiritual darkness who needed to be confronted. This is the architecture of delusion. In Ivana's fractured perception of reality, she was not planning a violent crime. She was answering a divine calling. She was not targeting an innocent woman and her family. She was engaging an enemy in a cosmic conflict. The violence was not violence in her mind. It was obedience. It was duty. It was sacred. And this is precisely what the family is describing when they use the word delusion. When someone has constructed an internally consistent alternate reality, one reinforced by perceived divine authority, they are not accessible through normal channels of reason, persuasion, or even love. They exist in a closed system where every attempt to challenge their beliefs is reinterpreted as further evidence of the spiritual battle they believe they are fighting. You cannot argue someone out of a delusion, because within that delusion, your arguments are exactly what the enemy would say. The family insists they attempted interventions. They claim they recognized the deterioration. They say they begged Ivana to seek help, to take medication, to reconnect with reality. But here is where the narrative starts to fracture. If the family was genuinely aware of the severity of Ivana's condition, if they understood she was hearing divine commands and constructing paranoid frameworks around public figures, then the question becomes not whether they tried, but whether they tried hard enough and through the right channels. Did they document her behavior in writing and submit it to mental health professionals? Did they contact law enforcement to flag her as a potential threat? Did they pursue an emergency psychiatric evaluation through the courts? Did they remove access to firearms from her environment? Did they contact social services regarding the welfare of her child? These are the concrete, actionable steps that exist even within a broken system. And the family statements, for all their emotional weight, do not address whether any of these steps were taken. To understand how Ivana arrived at the point of firing an AR-15 at a celebrity's home, we need to confront a cultural phenomenon that has been growing unchecked for over a decade: the normalization of parasocial obsession. The term "stan" originated from Eminem's 2000 song of the same name, a narrative track about a fan whose obsessive devotion spirals into murder-suicide. It was a horror story. It was a warning. And yet, within the span of a few years, internet culture appropriated the term and stripped it of its cautionary meaning. To call yourself a stan became a declaration of loyalty, a badge of honor, a signal that your devotion to an artist surpassed that of a mere casual listener. Social media platforms amplified this transformation by rewarding the most extreme expressions of fandom with visibility, engagement, and community validation. In the overwhelming majority of cases, stan culture is harmless. It is people finding joy, community, and identity through shared admiration for an artist. It is teenagers decorating their rooms with posters, adults bonding over concert experiences, online communities creating fan art and sharing memories. There is nothing inherently dangerous about loving an artist's work deeply. But the architecture of parasocial relationships contains a structural vulnerability that is rarely acknowledged. The fan feels a profound emotional connection to the celebrity, while the celebrity has absolutely no awareness that the fan exists. This asymmetry is usually benign. But in individuals who are psychologically vulnerable, those with untreated mental illness, those who have experienced trauma, those who struggle to form reciprocal relationships in their actual lives, the parasocial bond can begin to substitute for reality. The celebrity becomes a character in the fan's personal narrative. Their actions are interpreted through the lens of that imagined relationship. Their silence becomes neglect. Their success becomes a personal slight. Their romantic partnerships become betrayals. And when that imagined relationship curdles, when the fantasy cannot sustain itself against the indifference of reality, the psychological consequences can be catastrophic. Admiration inverts into resentment. Resentment intensifies into hatred. And hatred, in a mind already untethered from consensus reality, can crystallize into a justification for violence. This is the trajectory that Ivana appears to have followed. She did not simply admire Rihanna from a distance. She incorporated Rihanna into the fabric of her delusional framework. Rihanna became a figure of spiritual significance, whether as an object of reverence or, eventually, as an enemy to be confronted. The parasocial relationship, filtered through the distortions of mental illness, became indistinguishable from a real one. And when the internal logic of that relationship demanded action, Ivana acted. This dynamic is not new. What is new is the scale at which social media enables and accelerates it. Platforms provide unprecedented access to celebrity lives, their homes, their children, their daily routines, their vulnerabilities. They create the illusion of intimacy where none exists. And they reward obsessive engagement with algorithmic reinforcement, pushing users deeper into their fixations rather than diversifying their attention. The very infrastructure of modern social media is designed to intensify the kind of psychological attachment that, in its extreme form, produces people like Ivana. And here is the bitter irony that Ivana's cousin pointed out in one of her Instagram statements. The people who are now attacking the family online, sending death threats, doxing addresses, harassing relatives who had no involvement in the shooting, are exhibiting the exact same psychological pattern that drove Ivana to violence. They feel a personal connection to Rihanna. They believe her pain is their pain. They feel justified in taking aggressive action on behalf of someone who does not know they exist. The mechanism is identical. Only the degree of expression differs. Today, it is online harassment. Tomorrow, for someone else who is sufficiently unwell, it could be another AR-15. A central pillar of the family's defense is the car accident. According to their statements, Ivana was involved in a severe motor vehicle collision at some point in the past, serious enough to necessitate a GoFundMe campaign for medical expenses. And they claim that after this accident, Ivana fundamentally changed. Her personality shifted. Her grip on reality loosened. She became someone her family barely recognized. This explanation is not implausible. Traumatic brain injury is one of the most well-documented causes of dramatic personality change in medical literature. Damage to the frontal lobe can obliterate impulse control, transforming a cautious person into a reckless one. Injury to the temporal lobe can trigger hallucinations, paranoid ideation, and delusional thinking. Even relatively mild concussions, when repeated or untreated, can set off cascading neurological changes that manifest as psychiatric symptoms years after the initial trauma. The medical community has documented countless cases of individuals who were perfectly stable before a head injury and who became unrecognizable, aggressive, paranoid, delusional, or emotionally volatile in its aftermath. So the family's claim that the car accident was a turning point is medically credible. But credibility is not the same as completeness, and there are significant gaps in this narrative that demand examination. If the accident was severe enough to warrant a GoFundMe, it was severe enough to involve medical professionals. Were psychiatric evaluations conducted as part of her treatment? If personality changes were observed, were they documented? Were referrals made to neuropsychiatrists or behavioral health specialists? And if those referrals were made, did Ivana attend? Did the family ensure follow-through? If insurance limitations or financial constraints prevented adequate treatment, did the family explore community mental health resources, sliding scale clinics, or non-profit organizations that provide psychiatric care to underserved populations? These are not gotcha questions designed to vilify a family that is clearly suffering. They are essential inquiries into whether the available, if inadequate, resources were actually utilized. Because the family's narrative currently presents a binary. Either you can force someone into treatment, which the law largely prevents, or you are helpless. But between those two extremes lies a vast landscape of intermediate actions that can meaningfully reduce risk. And the family's statements do not address whether those intermediate actions were pursued. The broader systemic failure is undeniable and deserves acknowledgement. The American mental health system is, by virtually any measure, catastrophically inadequate. Involuntary psychiatric holds are limited to 72 hours in most jurisdictions and require a demonstration of immediate danger, a standard so narrow that it excludes the vast majority of people who are deteriorating but have not yet committed a violent act. Insurance coverage for ongoing psychiatric care is inconsistent at best, and for individuals without employer-sponsored insurance or the financial resources to pay out of pocket, sustained treatment is often simply inaccessible. The system is designed to respond to crises rather than prevent them, to stabilize rather than heal, to process rather than support. And the disparity between how the system treats wealthy individuals versus everyone else is grotesque. When Britney Spears experienced a mental health crisis, the legal system was able to construct a conservatorship that lasted 13 years, a mechanism of control so comprehensive that it governed every aspect of her life, from her finances to her reproductive autonomy. When Kanye West exhibited increasingly erratic behavior, the infrastructure of celebrity wealth management ensured that people with financial interests could exert influence over his treatment and decision-making. These are not examples of the system working well. They are examples of the system being weaponized in the presence of enormous wealth. But they demonstrate that the legal and medical mechanisms for long-term intervention do exist. They are simply not available to ordinary people. For someone like Ivana, financially struggling, uninsured or underinsured, navigating a system that was never designed to catch someone like her, the safety net has holes large enough to drive a truck through. This is a genuine tragedy within a tragedy. But acknowledging the system's failures does not absolve individual actors of the responsibility they bore. And the family's attempt to place the entirety of the blame on an abstract systemic failure, while understandable, is not entirely persuasive when the specific actions available to them remain unaccounted for. Beyond the family's statements and the systemic analysis, there are several dimensions of this case that remain unexplained and deeply troubling. The first is the question of an accomplice. Multiple reports have indicated that Ivana was not alone when she arrived at Rihanna's estate. Someone was with her, in the vehicle, aware of the destination, complicit at minimum in the journey and potentially in the planning. Law enforcement has been conspicuously silent on this detail, which suggests either an active and sensitive investigation or a complication that does not fit neatly into the emerging narrative. The family's statements do not address this at all. There is no mention of a second individual, no denial, no expression of shock at the possibility. This silence is notable. If someone helped Ivana reach that estate, if someone facilitated her access to the weapon, if someone participated in the planning of this attack, then this case expands dramatically beyond a single mentally ill woman acting on delusional impulses. It becomes a conspiracy. And conspiracies require a different kind of accountability. The second is the question of Ivana's marksmanship. 14 rounds were fired. 3 struck the Airstream trailer in a tight grouping at a consistent height. This is not the shooting pattern of someone who has never handled a firearm. AR-15 style rifles, while not inherently difficult to operate, do require a degree of familiarity to fire with any precision, particularly under the stress and adrenaline of a real-world attack. Where did Ivana acquire this competence? Was she previously trained? Did she practice in advance of the attack? Was someone else involved in preparing her? These questions are not idle speculation. They speak directly to the degree of premeditation and the potential involvement of additional parties. The third is the question of surveillance. Rihanna's estate is one of the most comprehensively monitored properties in Los Angeles. The camera coverage is extensive and continuous. Law enforcement almost certainly has footage of Ivana's approach, her movements on the property, and the moments leading up to and following the shooting. None of this footage has been released, which is standard for an active prosecution. But the existence of this footage means that the facts of what happened are knowable. They will eventually emerge. And if those facts contradict the family's narrative of a sudden, unpredictable mental break, if the footage shows prior visits, extended surveillance of the property, or behavior consistent with cold calculation rather than delusional frenzy, the family's carefully constructed defense will collapse. And then there is the question of Ivana's child. The family described Ivana as a good mother. But a good mother, by definition, is not someone so consumed by delusional fixation that she would arm herself with a semi-automatic rifle and fire on a stranger's home. The existence of this child raises urgent welfare questions. Where was the child during the shooting? Who is caring for the child now? Was the child exposed to Ivana's delusional thinking? Was the child's safety ever formally assessed by Child Protective Services? And if the family was aware of Ivana's deteriorating mental state, why did they not pursue custody of the child as a protective measure? These are not comfortable questions, but they are necessary ones. A child's safety is not a secondary concern. While the analysis of Ivana's mental state and the family's response dominates the discourse, we must not lose sight of who is at the center of this story: the victim. Rihanna is one of the most accomplished women in the history of the entertainment industry. She has sold hundreds of millions of records. She built Fenty Beauty into a billion-dollar empire. She redefined what it means to be a celebrity entrepreneur. And in recent years, she made the deliberate choice to step back from the relentless pace of public life to focus on motherhood and family. She was not courting controversy. She was not engaged in public feuds. She was not doing anything that could reasonably provoke hostility from any rational person. She was simply living, raising her children, enjoying her relationship with ASAP Rocky, existing in the private space she had carved out for herself. And now that private space has been violated in the most violent way imaginable. Rihanna cannot return to that home. The walls that were supposed to protect her family were perforated by bullets. The trailer that was supposed to be her intimate retreat became a target. The sense of safety that every person deserves within their own property has been obliterated. She now carries the knowledge that a stranger fixated on her intensely enough to plan and execute a firearms assault on her home while her children were present. That knowledge does not fade. Trauma of this nature embeds itself into the architecture of daily life. Every unexpected sound becomes a potential threat. Every unfamiliar face triggers a cascade of anxiety. The ability to relax in one's own space, to feel secure within one's own walls, is damaged in ways that even the most comprehensive therapy can only partially repair. And Rihanna will carry this for the rest of her life. Her children, even if they were not present for the shooting itself, will grow up in the shadow of it, with heightened security, with restricted freedom of movement, with the awareness that their family was targeted. This is the cost of fame that is rarely articulated honestly. Not the inconvenience of paparazzi or the annoyance of tabloid gossip, but the genuine, physical danger that comes with being visible to millions of people, some of whom are profoundly unwell. Celebrities live with the understanding that at any moment, someone in their vast, unknowable audience might decide that they are the focus of a fantasy, a grievance, or a divine mission. And there is no algorithm, no security system, no amount of money that can fully protect against that threat. You can build walls. Someone can fire over them. You can hire guards. Someone can arrive before they react. You can move to a new address. Someone can find it. The immediate future of this case is straightforward in its legal dimensions. Ivana faces charges that could result in decades of imprisonment, potentially life. The prosecution will present evidence of premeditation, the deleted social media, the precision of the shooting, the possible involvement of an accomplice. The defense will argue diminished capacity, citing the car accident, the documented delusion, and the family's testimony about her deterioration. A jury will decide. But the broader implications extend far beyond a single courtroom. Celebrity security across the entertainment industry is already being restructured in the wake of this incident. The realization that one of the most protected properties in Los Angeles was breached by a single determined individual has sent tremors through the world of high net worth protection services. We can expect to see increased investment in perimeter defense, more aggressive threat assessment protocols, expanded use of artificial intelligence for monitoring potential stalkers on social media, and a general increase in the physical distance between public figures and the public. This last consequence is particularly poignant because it feeds the very cycle that produced this crisis. The more celebrities retreat behind layers of security and distance, the more mysterious and inaccessible they become, and the more fertile the ground for parasocial fantasy. The The fan who cannot access the real person invents a version to replace them. And that invented version, unchecked by the corrective influence of actual human interaction, can evolve in any direction the fan psychology dictates. The conversation about stan culture will intensify, at least temporarily. There will be think pieces and panel discussions and social media debates about the toxicity of obsessive fandom. And then, as with every previous incident, the conversation will fade. Because stan culture is not merely a psychological phenomenon, it is an economic engine. It drives streaming numbers, concert revenue, merchandise sales, and social media engagement. The entertainment industry profits enormously from the intensity of fan devotion, and it has no structural incentive to moderate that intensity even when it crosses into dangerous territory. Platforms that thrive on engagement are architecturally opposed to reducing the very obsessive behavior that generates their most valuable metrics. The question of mental health reform will also be raised and, in all likelihood, will also recede without meaningful action. The systemic failures that allowed Ivana to deteriorate without intervention are not unique to her case. They affect millions of Americans who lack access to adequate psychiatric care. But the political and financial will required to transform the mental health system is enormous, and the urgency that follows a high-profile incident rarely translates into sustained legislative effort. We will hear calls for change. We will see bipartisan expressions of concern. And then the news cycle will move on, and the system will continue to function exactly as it does now, catching some people, missing most, and waiting for the next crisis to prompt the next cycle of performative alarm. Perhaps the most troubling implication is the certainty of escalation. History demonstrates with brutal clarity that high-profile attacks on celebrities inspire imitation. The attention, the notoriety, the sense of significance that comes from breaching the world of the famous. These are powerful motivators for individuals who feel invisible, powerless, or unmoored from reality. Somewhere, right now, someone is watching the coverage of this incident and feeling not horror but recognition. Not revulsion but inspiration. And the next attack, against some other public figure in some other city, is already germinating in a mind that the system will not catch in time. Selena Quintanilla was murdered by the president of her own fan club. John Lennon was assassinated by a man who had asked for his autograph hours earlier. Christina Grimmie was shot dead after a concert by a man who had traveled across the country to find her. Rebecca Schaeffer was killed at her front door by a fan who had been writing her letters for years. The pattern is clear. It is decades old, and we have made almost no meaningful progress in disrupting it. This story does not have a clean resolution. It does not offer the comfort of a clear villain and a clear hero. Ivana is simultaneously a perpetrator of horrific violence and a casualty of catastrophic mental illness. Her family is simultaneously sympathetic in their grief and questionable in their inaction. The mental health system is simultaneously the proximate cause of this failure and a reflection of broader societal choices about what we fund, what we prioritize, and whose suffering we consider worthy of attention. Rihanna is simultaneously one of the wealthiest and most powerful women in the world and utterly vulnerable to the random cruelty of a stranger's delusion. The questions this incident raises do not have easy answers. How do we balance individual liberty with public safety when someone is deteriorating but has not yet committed a crime? How do we regulate the parasocial dynamics that social media amplifies without descending into authoritarian surveillance? How do we build a mental health system that intervenes proactively rather than reactively in a political environment that resists the necessary investment? How do we protect public figures from threats that are, by their nature, unpredictable and decentralized? These are the questions that will define the aftermath of this incident. Not just for Rihanna and her family, not just for Ivana and hers, but for every person who exists in the space between fame and anonymity, between admiration and obsession, between a functioning mind and a broken one. The family has broken their silence. But their words, however sincere, have not closed the conversation. They have opened it. And what emerges from that opening, what we learn, what we demand, what we change, will determine whether this moment becomes a turning point or merely another entry in a long and growing list of tragedies we chose not to prevent.